today. So but it's part of it's part of what you find when you do this research. And I'm not the only one who's found this. Jacques Vallée has found this. Garry Nolan too. So when we were actually going to the site in New Mexico, one of the things that he said was, you know, Diane, if this was like 100 years ago, you'd be looking at these as angels and demons, you know, and that's in American Cosmic. So he's also aware of this part, and his research uncovers a lot of very disturbing things. So yeah, I would suggest that when people are looking at this and they're new to it, they need to be aware that it's a lot more complicated than just what we see in entertainment media.
Right. I think all you're going to get from Congress is this sort of thing right here.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
They're just saving it for closed session. It's not for the rest of us. So it's interesting you brought up Garry Nolan. What sort of disturbing things that you can talk about as he turned up?
Well, he talks
we're talking about
I'm sorry,
we're talking about, can you tell everybody who Garry Nolan is, by the way?
Yeah. So I met Garry Nolan probably about 2013, maybe 2014. And he was a person that Jacques introduced me to, and he's a scientist at Stanford. And he's a really top-rate world-class scientist. And he has a bunch of labs at Stanford. And so he's interested in this topic because he is an experiencer. And he's been very public about this, but he wasn't at first because, you know, before the disclosures came out from the New York Times and so forth, this was still pretty under the, you know, people didn't want to be known. And so I used pseudonyms, which, by the way, I have to do as a professor because it's part of the ethical process of doing field research. So if people want to be protected with a pseudonym, it is my duty to protect them with that, even if people know who they are. So I just wanted to say that because a lot of people are asking me, you know, why don't you just say who these people are? So Garry came out probably about a year and a half ago on Twitter and said, I'm James. So in American Cosmic, he's this professor that I meet. He studies this, and he's a scientist. And we go out to New Mexico because Tyler's taking us out there, and he wants to show us, you know, these debris from this crash site. And I'm not a believer at that point. And so that's who James is. And so some of the disturbing research that he's engaged in is basically he wants to create, or at least he did during the writing of American Cosmic, he wanted to create some type of interface so that this thing it could happen on our terms and not on the terms of whatever it is, whatever this phenomena is. So he wanted to create like a pill or something that people could take so that this wouldn't happen to them. Because sometimes what happens to people is that, you know, well, it's not on their own terms, right? It happens to them. They have no agency in this. They're not autonomous. This is happening when they're sleeping sometimes, right? And they are not enjoying it. You know, they don't like it. It's disturbing. And so he wanted to stop it from happening, and he wanted to learn everything he possibly could. And part of what he learned was that these had effects on people, and you could see this. So I'm